Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to the budget hearing. I'd like to start the meeting by calling on Mr. Okenquist to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to acknowledge the key contributors. Well, there's our agenda for this evening. Just leave that up there. I'm not going to read through everything we're going to be going through because we'll be doing that. And then our key contributors to this budget are First Selectman Jim Zioli, John Cifarelli to my right, the Director of Finance and Administration, Audrey Gear, who's his assistant, who is unable to be here this evening, Art Williams, our treasurer, the Orange Board of Education and the Board of Education Finance Committee, the Amity Board of Education and their Finance Committee, and there's members here from both of those, which is great. Our town department heads, which do an excellent job. This board, myself, Kevin Houlihan, Jim Leahy, Kevin McNabola, Kevin Moffett on my left, and Joe Nuzzo, Ajit Jain, and Megan Rebuse are not with us this evening. Okay. Our budget development our development process basically starts once this budget hopefully is approved. We started in June of 2022. We established our budget guidelines based on economic conditions, revenue projections, and affordability to the taxpayers. Amity develops their budget with their Board of Education and Finance Committee, the same for the Orange School System. Our town department budgets are developed by the department heads, their staff, reviewed and adjusted by the First Selectman and our Finance Director. Our board reviews all three budgets, meets regularly, including an all-day meeting in February to finalize a total town operating budget. And this budget before you this evening is based on a prioritization of needs, affordability, and our ongoing pandemic and inflation realities. The budget before you this evening was a 6-0 vote from our board, and so that's very important. And we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Leahy.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you.
Some of these slides, some of you have heard before. I'll just briefly go through them. We see the Board of Finance having a couple of responsibilities. By the way, any data that you see in this presentation is 100% consistent with, or should be, I'll take the errors if there isn't, with the document that you have in your hands, okay? It's just trying to summarize it in a different way. And this PDF, it would be available after this meeting. One of the responsibilities, of course, is we got to juggle, just like you do at home, right? You have a balancing act of what you want to spend your money on, all right, and how much money you want to spend or you can collect. So as you can see, all right, we have obviously growing requests, it's just like at home, all right? And we have a lot of infrastructure needs. I know probably, Donnie, you have people around town, all right, already doing the roads, right? I've been running on some that have already been, you haven't put the paving down, but you've done the first part. Public safety, obviously that's a concern. Health and welfare, obviously our commitment to the schools. We spend a lot of our money on the schools, and rightfully so. And adapting to other things that happen in the state cuts or assigned costs that we have. So what we're trying to do and what we have in terms of town taxes this year, we and when you look at our revenue pie, which we'll show you, all right, that 92.3% of it comes from town taxes. All right, we don't get a lot of money from, like some towns, like from the state or the government, that type of thing. So I just wanted to remind us of that. So that's the first responsibility of the Board of Finance. The second, I still think we all do this at home. And we always, oh, I'll take that one because it's $1 less, right? Or I'll go buy gas down the street at Costco because I save money. That's doing more with less. We do it instinctively. We don't have to make it a big to-do about it. But on the Board of Finance, that becomes part of our job when people come in and make requests. Hey, Billy, why do you need that particular thing over here? That's our job, to ask these questions. All right, so those are the two things that we see as our role to try to do the job we were elected to do for the town. I heard this, and you've seen this if you've come to presentations in prior years, about compound interest. And I heard, and I know that Megan Rabus, who couldn't make it here tonight, mentioned to me about 3 months ago to listen to this podcast called All In. It's some venture capital guys. It's a pretty good podcast, I found out, from listening to it. And they even mentioned it this past week, last Friday, I think it was, the 14th. One of the guys said, Americans have no clue about compound interest, all right? So I put up this graph, and it only shows the difference between a 1% increase over 10 years, the lower graph, and if it went up 4%, 10 years. And the number starts at 100, and you can see it goes up to 110 if it was 1% a year. Taxes, what you would pay. But if it goes up 4% a year, you're up to 148. Now, we instinctively know that some of this is happening now when we start saying, gee, wish I could still get that 3% mortgage, right? Or refi. But that's what we're striving to be doing when we think of. We're always thinking about, oh, it's just another 0.5%. That's not the way we think about it, because we keep this thought in mind. So I just wanted to mention in our responsibilities, Board of Finance, that's the kind of thinking that we do, and that's why we ask the questions that we do. One of the benefits of doing this and doing it well is you get what we have. This is AAA credit rating. And when the guys came and said, oh, what makes a AAA credit rating, I would ask these people. So I didn't go to a book and make this up. I asked the question and took notes when they answered. Conservative fiscal policies. Economic development, how good are you doing at that? Solid fund balance. Community involvement. I think Orange for years and still has today for sure, A+ in the fourth category there, community involvement in so many ways about the town. I think, Paul, we've talked when we went to Dunkin' Donuts a couple of times, we'll be dead and gone in not so long a future, unfortunately. But we hope, both of us, hope that the community involvement, and we think that we're the type of town where that will stay. And that's a big factor when they look at towns and how they rate their credit agencies, along with the others. Open communication. Well, we're here on OGAT. You can ask the questions you want to ask today, at least about this, and you can go to any meeting as far as I know, and I think we do a very good job of that here in Orange. Do you fund your pensions? Some towns do not do that. We do it 100% every year, right?
Every year. There's several surrounding towns that do not, and they're again in trouble.
All right. So these are the types of things. When you say you got a good end result, these are the factors: fully funded pensions. All right. You collect your taxes at a very high rate. People pay what they owe. And so when you do that, and that's the kicker box, what I call them kicker box at the bottom of the page, to sum it up, a AAA credit rating decreases our bond interest rates. So therefore, guess what? We're doing more with less because we will pay less taxes for interest for borrowing. It's a very good thing. And it's also a very good thing for our school system, such as Amity, because we're one half of Amity. So when they look at Amity, they're really looking at the member towns, right? So that's a particularly good thing for us. So I just want to remind you of that. Now, let's get to the chase, right? Everybody's sitting here saying, okay, can you cut to the chase? We can. Each year we show this chart. We have the 3 budget components. We all know what they are: the town, Amity, K through 6, OBOE. On our revenue side, as you can see, or if you can't see there, I'll just jot it out. We have an increase this year. We have the good fortune of a 2.83% increase in revenue. Now, last year, some of you may recall, was 5. We're going to talk about the relative strength of 2.83 when we get to that section of the component. But that's what we got for the increase in granular smidge, if you're wondering what that revenue thing is. Okay? We have the spending. You can see on the left-hand side in the bottom, it's a little over $80 million, $80,249,651. Most importantly, it represents a 2.40% increase in spending. So revenue went up, 2.83, brand list anyway. Spending in aggregate, 2.40. So, it should come no surprise, really, that there should be a decrease in your taxes since you had more coming in than you had going out, right? And that number turns out to be, let's see what it says, 1.22%. All right? So we all know what we paid for taxes next year. If this budget were to be accepted, right, then that would be the end result. And we'll have the details of that further in this presentation. All good? Let's talk about that grand list, because it seems to me that the more we understand where our revenue comes from as a town, we all know where it comes from in our houses, we'll be better off we are. Three major components. Real estate, it's the biggest one. Business personal property, motor vehicle. And if you're like me, I get a bill, where does it come in, John, in June, annually? And I got two pieces of the bill, one for my house and one for my car. I only have one car. And so, and where you pay your taxes, it goes into those three, one of those three buckets, probably the real estate and motor vehicle. What's very interesting is you look at the data. So I'll walk you through the chart, just make sure. You have fiscal year 21, 22, 21, and 22. Now, they take this in October of 22, so that sets the mill rate, or sets the grand list, which then becomes the base for the fiscal year 23, 24 fiscal year. So you have to kind of get your years kind of jogged back into that style. So you can see the increases of the three. Real estate went up about 16 million odd. Business personal property went up 33 million, double the real estate. Now, what's significant about that is this. Take a look at the base. You got a $1.8 billion in real estate. It went up 0.9%, 16 million. But business personal property was only 208 million, right? It was only, what, 1/6, something like that? Or maybe, oh my gosh, 1/9, John, right? Meant 1/8 and 1/9 of the real estate. So what you can see, it went up to 242. That was a very healthy increase. And then you can see the motor vehicle went up 13.5 million. So the percentage increases, as you can see, real estate, since there's so much of it, right, it's hard to get a big boost, but that went up 0.9%. And the business personal property went up, what's that say, 16%. 16%. And that the motor vehicle, that's our cars, it went up a little over 7%. Now, Mark Brancasi, our town assessor, he said to me, this was a strong grand list improvement, and it was led by UI's business personal property. It was mostly UI's business personal property that put up, that increased that center line. So in total, it went up $63 million in grand list, which means you tax things that on the new asset values, which means more taxes coming into the town. And therefore, and there's that 2.83 number that I mentioned before. So to give a summary comment, when I was talking with Mark, this seemed to be the best one. This grand list, 2022, increase of 2.83 was 93% higher than the average over the last 10 years, taking out the reval years because they kind of goof up things. So we took that out. 93% higher, almost double what you could normally say, normally expect. So again, when you have more money coming in, that's good for the overall of the town. Now, one more final slide on this section. Why did it go up in each component? Mark told me that the real estate was really a strong increase, and it was led by the number of real estate improvements in town. You know, people doing extra things for their homes, building an addition, that kind of thing. Business personal property, as I mentioned on the prior slide, that was almost 100% led by UI, okay? The value of having them be our commercial neighbor. Motor vehicles, I was surprised when it went up, but he said to me that there was an increase. He was showing me these spreadsheets and stuff. and he said there was an increase in the number of new vehicles. And even though the used car market went down slightly, and I asked him for some more data on that, to be honest with you, but he said it went down slightly. So that meant in the overall, it still went up that 7% that we talked about in the last slide, and the same number is sitting right there. So, all right, all of these property this year, unlike last year where the cars were taxed at a different rate, all of them will be taxed at the same mill rate, which in our presentation tonight to present to you happens to be for next year's 3.2.3 run, but that has to be approved. Okay? So that's a little bit more background on where our revenue comes from. Okay? And that's important for us because that's like more money coming into your house would be good for you. Now, I'm put this economic development up here because that also ties to, right, the real estate component of this and business personal property. These are the top 10 taxpayers. I don't know if in the audience you can read them, but I'll just kind of go through them. I think we're all familiar with them pretty much. UI is the first one. Second one's Southern Connecticut Gas. Third one's Grand Reserve. That's some of the properties on Prindle Hill Road.
Yeah, we see Old Avalon.
The old Avalon?
Yeah.
Okay. The fourth one is Connecticut Light and Power, the utility, right? The fifth one is the FedEx building on top of Marsh Hill Road, right? The sixth one is a real estate leasing. I'm really not sure which one that is, John.
Executive Boulevard and some of those other big warehouse buildings and all.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. The Orange VA is number 7. The Orange Plaza is LLC is number 8. The lodging, that's the 2 lodging at the top of Marsh Hill. I believe one is Marriott and the other is Hilton, thank you. And Raymore and Flanagan Plaza is the 10th one. And what you can see from the chart, whether you can read it or not, is they bring in 339 in the Met Grand list, 339 million, which is 14.66% of our grand list, 15%, all right? 15%. And the amount of taxes they bring in, remember, we got an $80 million budget, right? The amount of taxes they bring in is over $11 million. Compared to last year, they're actually growing in terms of the size of particularly the top 2, they're increasing significantly, all right? Where last year it was only 13% of our grand list and it brought in 10.2 million. So the net of all this is that the increase in the amount of taxes, as estimated by our town assessor, is an 8.06% increase just from our top 10, which is a good news thing. All right, good news thing.
Jim, can you just make sure you stand close to the mic? It's having trouble picking you up.
Okay, thank you. Don't wander around is what you're really saying, right? Roger that. Thank you. Quick, there's a process to anything, right? If you do the work that I'll do, we always try to create a visual of the process. And what this is saying, look, if you come in and say, hey, I want to build something in Orange, okay. Well, you go to a preliminary meeting. That's box number 1. All right, there's sub-steps under that. That's the bullets there. You submit preliminary plans, box number 2. Box number 3, you do pre-submission meetings. And some of these boxes are iterative meetings. They're not one stop, you do step 1, step 2. You know, sometimes you have to come back a number of times. You have various committee reviews. That may take a fair amount of time. They got to be approved, right? And then you construct approval plans so that you get through the system, and then you get to step 6 where you've completed the project, you've already done the construction. So you figure you're getting approvals along the way through steps 1 through 6, okay? Now, this can take a fair amount of time. It could be as short as 9 months, maybe even sooner. But sometimes it's 36 months. It depends on the size of the project, right? Not only in terms of the size of the physical construction, but the size of the complexity in terms of getting approvals that pass muster with the particular town. Because I think this slide here, in terms of the steps, is probably pretty generic from town to town on the overall, all right? So the idea is this. It takes a while when you say, oh, let's get somebody in here. it's gonna take a while before it comes out the back door paying taxes. That's all I'm trying to say. Having said that, one of the things I have learned, and I'm not an expert in, but I understand the concept, is as something goes through this process and starts being constructed or gets through milestones in the process, we start what they call enhanced value for that project, for that property, and you get taxes on that level of enhanced value. So you may be going for this amount of value, okay? But at some point in the process, after step 4.5 or something like that, you may be 25% of the way, so you would be taxed on parts of that. So I don't want to get it, I'm sure there's a doctoral thesis that I'll never read, all right, but that's how it works. All right, if you've come here before, you've seen some of this material. So, but those who haven't been here before, these are, we were asked a number of years ago, so let's assume it to be 2017. So 2018, we started saying, okay, tell the public what's been going on in terms of economic development. So I created a process, right, with Jim and others in the process. And what we did is we said, all right, so I'll just do the first one. Hilton Garden Inn, all right, where is it located? What step in the process was? Well, in 2015 and 2016, it was a 5. That meant it had been approved, but it hadn't been constructed yet. And lo and behold, it became a 6, paying taxes. It's still a 6, obviously, all right? And this estimated value is not necessarily the tax value, but the construction value. All right, so I'm just trying to summarize it so that we have a snapshot in history for what we're doing in this area. Yes, miss?
Yes, so what exactly are you doing with the Hilton that's been in existence? The development that has to go on?
Well, when they came to town, I'm sure Jimmy is probably better at this, but when they came to town, they had to come into the process, have a meeting, all right? They were told, okay, you have to do this, thus, and thus.
But they came into the town when?
Well, it must have been before 2018 because they were already at step 5 at that point.
Right.
And now they're fully open.
And now they're fully
They have
open.
been since COVID.
I'm just wondering what the time scale is here.
How many years before
Accomplished.
218, I think?
Oh, in that particular case, I'll tell you what, we will see in some of the ones coming up that that one is one of the first ones on this list, right? Others are going to have in 2018 nothing. And then you're going to see numbers kind of going forward. It depends on it just depends on the complexity and the size of the project and getting approvals. There could be a minor hang-up to get an approval, for example, which could cost time. That's my understanding of it, miss. Good question. All right? All right, so anyway, the only one that from last year that changed on this list of 7 was number 5 there, Gyroscope Development, which is over on Smith Farm Road. You can see it wasn't even, it was zeros back in those early years for 3 years through 2020. Then it was a 1, they just had a preliminary meeting. Then it was already a 5, then last year was a 5, it's still a 5, okay? And the comment over here, it says under construction, 48 rental units, there's an affordable housing option on that, okay? So that's the only one on this page that's different from last year. And as you can see, and maybe I should have showed you that one as an example, miss, of how it goes through time. All right, so next year I would think that it would be a 6, it would be constructed and already built.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is the 46 rental units, is that affordable housing, is it an option for all 46 or is it just a percentage?
I don't know the details of that, but when I heard someone say affordable housing option, it's an option to that, but you don't have to be an affordable option. But now you're getting into details where I didn't ask those questions.
Okay.
There's a lot of people you could ask more questions about. Okay, page 2 of 4. You can see that the first one, how many now know on Indian River Road have seen the Vero? A lot of you? Okay, so that's an assisted living thing, it just opened. It moved from a 5 to a 6. Back in 2018, miss, to your point, all right, it was a 4. So you can see that took a while to get from 2018 to actually open. I think it just opened a little while ago, right? Okay, so the Vero is a new one. The other one I wanted to mention in yellow is the redevelopment project in the Firelight Place. I think everybody who goes on the post office, Old Tavern Road, you know. My understanding is that there's two components of that. One was already open last year. I use a 6 and a 5. The first component was a liquor store, and the second one is those rental units. There are 72 of them, as I understand it, and they're planning on opening in the fall. All right? So that's, again, a reflection of economic development in town. That's page 2. Page 3, all right, you see the Amazon hub. That was open last year, the fleet. And then you see a new one here, Salemi Properties. Last year it was a 0. They've cut it into 2 pieces. One piece gets a 4, one gets a 1. That's how you read, that's how I'm trying to communicate this. The 4 is, it's a zoning approved for self-storage, so it's in the middle stage. And the 1 stage, so it must be 2 components of this property. All right, they knocked down some buildings and they're planning for some kind of commercial use. So from my interviews, that's what I was able to find out. The 2 on the bottom of the page, I'm sure you know where Haven Hot Chicken is, right? Right by Trader Joe's. And also right next to it is Jimmy John's. All right, neither last year, when we had this meeting, was open. They're open now. So there's an example in 1 calendar year where a very small, quick, fast food kind of thing, although it's not really fast food, I guess, some of it is, all right, have now been opened in 1 year's time. Okay?
That was an existing building.
And they didn't have to build a building. Good point. Sounds like there's a guy who knows how to do stuff like that, as opposed to myself. All right? Okay, final page. Now, these are all new ones from last year. So let's do them one at a time, but quick. Noble Manufacturing, right off that exit 41 ramp near where Southern Connecticut Gas is. They're at stage 2. I'm not quite sure what the number is for a value. This is their status is they're pending reviews and updates. What it is, it seems to be like a gas and convenience store, and they also want to display electric vehicles or electronic vehicles, something like that. The next one under that, Racebrook Medical Center. I think a lot of people probably saw pictures of that. That's over on the Post Road, right behind the Webster Bank there, near Racebrook Road. That's in stage 5, all right? And it's under construction. It's the former trailer site. Next one, just to get through these, Southern Connecticut Wellness. That's on the Post Road. TD Bank, I believe, is the former structure. And it's in stage 5. Some part of it is under construction, and the state licensing is under review. All right, that's the status as I understand it of that. All right, Beecher Walk, we really should have had this on there last year. There's an error on my part, but that is now completely filled. That's the one. It says South Orange Center Road. More people may know it as down by the transfer station. But that's all filled up now. And finally, Aurora, they had kind of an expansion, and they've completed that. So again, that might have been one that I don't know if they've done it exactly in 1 year, but certainly it wasn't on the list for last year, so I wanted to get it on now. So there's your sense of activity. And again, this isn't even talking, if you go back a number of years, you can put a lot of stuff on this, right? So that's what you got there. Okay. Now, for this budget, we come up with what we think are underlying considerations to be thinking about as we grapple with the budget requests, the amount of budget requests we have, what we at the time maybe don't know a clear sighting on what the grand list is, because we don't usually know that till like March. All right, so these are the ones, and we come up with 6 each year. And the first one, I think to no one's surprise, is this one. This is data on inflation. Saw an article. This one only goes up to from January to January, so January of 21 to January of 23. I think the latest monthly number of inflation it's down to 5 now. But at this point in time, when I grabbed this back in January, U.S. inflation for these years, you can see that's going up, and that surprises no one in this room, right? All right, so the average over that monthly period, 24 months, all right, was 6.35 per month, okay? So that's one factor impacting the residents of Orange. And Kevin, I don't know if you would help me with
Sure.
that factor or others.
Yeah, the others, we get, after, we go through this every year, and our next issue is, our number 2 is safety and security. We all live here, travel on the highways, travel on our town roads. It seems drivers are out of their minds, which is not a good thing. And overall crime, probably up. The chief's not here, but I know with the speeding we have on Route 34, and some other issues, the thefts of catalytic converters from people's cars in their driveways. And then, I'm sure Vince will mention it later, but the Orange Board of Education now has security officers at the school, so it's, you know, the safety and security is a serious issue to the residents. Move on. Wage growth. 46% of our current budget for the town employee, on the town side, is salaries, salary increases, so wage growth. And then you get out into the business world, you know, our small businesses, restaurants, their costs are all going up as minimum wage it rises every year now. So that's a concern. And in our own programs, our park and rec, summer camps and everything, you know, the cost of labor is going up there. So that's always a concern of ours.
Can I ask one question on that? Sorry to interrupt.
No, go.
Do you have an overall percentage of salary increase for the town, or is it by each department?
The town wages overall went up $653,000 this year. If we take last year's salaries. and-
About 2.25, right, Cap?
Yeah.
About 2.25% on average, yeah.
Within 1 or 2, I believe, yes.
Okay, Kevin, you want to go to the next one?
Yep.
Thank you.
The home heating costs, this was a big scare, I think, for most of us back in December. Still isn't positive, but at least we're in the spring. And we did luck out with a more mild winter than we've had over the years, but, you know, that's still a concern going forward, as is our next issue, which is gasoline prices. You know, they were down, we're now escalating back up. Near my office in Branford, everything's $3.59 and above now, and a few weeks ago it was in the 320s. So commuting, or the delivery of food costs, that's gonna affect us across the board as it has, you know, in the past year. And finally, as Jim mentioned earlier about mortgages, interest rates increases. Our mortgages are higher, car loans, home equity loans if people are looking to do improvements. I don't know personally, but I would expect, because they were already high before the rate hikes, you know, student loans were way too high to begin with. You know, so the cost of borrowing is increasing, and it's gonna affect us at the town level with future bonding.
Good, thanks, Kevin. All right, so
Then-
what we've done so far is giving you an overview of who got involved, a little bit of our role, bottom line, right, bottom line up front. And then we spent some time both explaining the grand list so that everybody can be more conversant on that. And we invested time in economic development, what we have seen as things that will eventually, and some already have been, turned into taxes from their development. And again, any development we get from the economic side, right, means less we need from the residential side, okay? So there's that. So what we're gonna do in the next sections is we're going to give you an overview of the spending request, and then each of the 3 spending components will come up here and present their spending request, and then we'll come to the last section of the presentation after those 3. So that's what's gonna happen in the next little bit, about 5 to 10 minutes, we'll get through this, okay? So here's the deal. Here's our expenditures for the town. This chart is in your book, all right? It's in your book, same one. As you can see, there's various components. There's a component for Orange Education, there's a component for Amity, and then the others are split up on various parts of town operations, all right? So, including the debt service. Second slide, the next one, which is also in the book, was the revenue that's going to support that. Again, we have estimated what we think the mill rate would be, and so this is in there as well. So you can see it at the property taxes. I mentioned earlier 92.3. You can see it there, the large blue. Now that property taxes is both residential and commercial. Okay? It's both. All right. How do you sum it up? I'm going to use this slide and focus on one thing on the slide at each time. Ready? You can see the 2.40. You can see where the numbers are. All right, this slide is not in your book, but the numbers are in your book. Okay? So, 2.40, there's last year's budget. Here's this year's budget. Okay? You can see the town budget, the debt and capital, the Orange Public Schools, the Amity Regional Schools, and the reduction that we had from a referendum vote last this spring. All right? Obviously, we don't have one of those for this current year, and therefore you can see the budget increases, so now I'm going to go through them one at a time. First, the town budget. The town budget is going up 5.5%. All right? We're going to explain that in a minute. Debt and capital goes up about 5%. That'll be explained. The Orange Public Schools is coming in with a budget request of 3.39%. That will be a presentation. The Amity budget, there's two components to the Amity budget. One is, what did the budget go up? The answer to that is 2.25%. But unlike the other things, which is a direct drop down, you know, the town budget, we have to pay for it. At Amity, it's a little different. At Amity, we're actually going to be paying 1% less this year than we did last year. And I'd like to take time to explain that. There's something called each year at Amity ADM, Average Daily Membership. And what it really means is this. Each town puts a number of students into the school, Bethany, Orange, Woodbridge. You get a total, and if you have 20% of the total, you pay 20% of the cost of the following year's budget. Okay? I think that concept is pretty good. So what you see on the left, when you have October 1st of 2021, that was setting the rate for what each of the three towns would pay of the total Amity budget for the following year, following fiscal year, which would have been 22-23, which we're in right now. And just to show it orange, you can see we had a 50, or perhaps I need to read it to you, 50.369%. They always do it out to 3 decimal points because it's a lot of money. And that's a good thing that they do that. They had 2,166 students. We had 1091. This year, October 1st, you can see the numbers. Bethany, Orange, Woodbridge. You can see the change. All of them went down. 6, 74, 6. So the total went down by 66. You can see that by the 2166 and the 28. All right, just math. But what, in terms of budgeting, what it meant is that Orange no longer was at 50.369%. It was at 48.894%. And over on the right, I put in red what the number of a reduction was for the town of Orange. 1.476% reduction, which meant we had to pay as a percentage of the total about 1.5% less than what we did in the prior year's budget, the budget year we're currently in. Okay? Now, over on the right, I just wanted to, just a primer. If you have about a $54 million budget, which is the size Amity's about, you know, near there anyway, 1% change in your town's up or down is going to move the request or decrease the request up or down by $540,000. Right? That's the math. If it's 0.1%, which feels like a very small number, 54, 5, 2, excuse me, I said 0.1, I skipped one. 0.5% is half of that 540,270, right? And if it's 0.1%, it's 54,000. All right? So, when you're looking at a budget from Amity and its impact in the town, you also have to be aware of what's happened to your membership. How many students do you have in there as a percentage of the total? For example, look at Bethany and look at Woodbridge. Both of them went down in students, 6. But their percentage of the total went up. For example, Bethany went down near 0.5%, 6 students, but almost went up 0.5%. 0.5% is 270,000. It's a little less than that for .441.
Can you explain that?
Yes, miss?
You get less students and you increase?
Because your basis on which you are charged is on the total number of students. So even though you went down 6, your share of the total went up. It went from 17.036 to 17.452. It's a little counterintuitive, or you may say, well, that doesn't feel right, but that's the math. And if that's what you decide should be the way it goes, that's the way it is. It's always been that way, by the way. Chris?
Jim, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes, sir.
So the percentage that we're asking from Amity, the 2.25, which is the lowest percentage being asked there, has nothing to do with enrollment though, correct?
Correct.
Right, so,
That's correct. I was just going to the budget side of it,
but
Chris.
the enrollment is the actual impact on Orange. Orange is actually getting an extra $250,000 back off of what we paid the year before.
Oh, no, it's more than that, Chris.
It's 264.
If you, let's just say it's 1.5%.
It's, yes, but I'm saying just as bottom line, it's like $250,000 less than last year's.
It's 540 for 1%. Let's just round that to 0.5%.
With the 2.25 increase.
We'll do one thing at a time. Just the shift, you're going down, and I'm just going to round this to 1.5 reduction, okay? You're going to go down 540, and you're going to go down 270. So we went down 810. And then, which is in the bottom line there, well, let me finish the slide, and then I'll come back to you if you feel you need. So minor ADM shifts, like that lady in the back was asking, gee, that was a little, can result in significant impact, not just to Orange, but all town member budgets. This isn't the impact to Orange thing, right? 0.5% shift, it would be 270. Now, that's on the overall. Also, what you have here would be, if you're impacting what's going to impact your budget, as Chris says, you have to take into account, okay, but the budget of last year and budget of next year is going to be different. So you have to take that into account also. So it's a complex thing. So all I want you to take away is when you see what happens in terms of any regional school system budget, I think they're all done the same way, right? It isn't like somebody devised something magical or nefarious. This is just the way it is. So be aware of it. Thank you. All right, and finally, there's your summary chart 2.40. So if I could keep you going through here, I'd like to now talk to town services, then we'll go to Vince, and then we'll go to Amity, and we'll go through it. So first of all, in town services, we only have 3 slides. The first one looks at the 8 components of revenue. This should be very close to your chart that I showed you earlier, which has this type of thing in it, right? In your thing, all right? The revenue. Property taxes, collections, interest and liens, licensing permits and fees, you can see them, all right? You can see last year's amount, you can see this year's amount, you can see the change, you can see the percentage change, and then I just give various green and red arrows whether they went up or when they went down. And Kevin and John, I'd like to request your help in commenting on this chart, please.
Well, the property taxes is clear. That's from the grand list growth and the decline in the proposed mill rate this year. That's why it's 193 instead of the 283. Our license permits and fines, $274,000 of the 292 increase is based on the increase in building permits and fines and whatnot projected by that department and the increase in the rates. Interest, it's just we all see what's going on out there. We went from 1/10 of 1%, if we were lucky, to probably 4.5%, 5% in some of our,
I think we estimated
Stiffs.
at 4.
so that's a massive number and bonus to the town. And then we get to the fund balance and Amity refund. We did not spend any money out of fund balance last year as we had in the past. And there was a budget line for $700,000 in 22-23 for our share of the projected surplus. And this year, we have not included that in the budget because their policy is different going forward with their surplus.
John, you want to comment then?
No, I think Kevin pretty much covered it all. Just on the license and permit, we did increase the fees for building permits, so that covers a lot.
That drove a lot of this 40% increase,
Yes.
44% increase? Okay.
Budgeting the fund balance, Amity refund.
I'm sorry, sir?
The fund balance and Amity refund
Yes, sir?
isn't in the budget.
There's no
We
projected
estimate-
revenue, yes.
There's no revenue.
We have not put any revenue for those two components in this year's budget. That is correct. Okay? Now, the second of the three slides for the town. This is a slide that we generated a number of years ago. I know Kevin and I have a next step in the fall to take a closer look at some of our own town expenditures, but be that as it may, one year we actually located over $1 million in the town. This year, we take a look at line items, we look for targets, and we reduce some. In this case, there were 13 that were reduced, and the summary line is that we reduced it by a little over $200,000. I think on average over the last number of years, I think we did this at one of our meetings, Kev, I think it was an average of 600,000 that we have taken out. So this is what we did back in early March, and we examine ours, besides the fact that we spend all day looking at budgets, and John and Audrey do their own reductions independent of the Board of Finance. So we do hard scrutiny at our own town budgets. Now, those budgets get placed into these 7 categories. The columns next to them, from general government, public safety, public works and public buildings, culture and recreation, health and welfare, employee benefits, and town services, and under the line there is debt service and capital. You have the column which was last year, you have the column which is this year, you have the change, and then you have the percentage change. And again, I'd like to lean on John and Kevin and any of the members of the board, but start with them in terms of each of those items. I spiked out 5 that seemed like ones we should talk about.
Well, our general government, most of, 116,000 of the 240 is in salary increases. We also have $10,000 in data processing costs for the assessor's office that are new. We have an electrical inspector salary of $43,000, but that position was actually added in by the Board of Selectmen in December, so it's not new, but it's new in this budget. Our town clerk has $15,000 in new software costs. We're seeing those going across the board, for just like we're upgrading and getting into the 21st century finally. And again, like utilities, we have a $15,000 projected increase just at our town hall building with what's going on, which now they're saying they might give a reduction in the summer, but I don't know. I don't trust them. Public safety, the police salaries in there are up by $336,000. And we also increased our volunteer fire department contribution by $38,300, and I think that's money well spent. And and that's $375,000 out of the 437 number. And, small
Okay.
accounts changed
Good.
there. Public Works, again, 78,000 of that increase is salaries. Our streetlight electricity budget is up by $27,000. Our water for the fire hydrants is projected to rise by $35,000. The biggest thing in there is our residential recycling program. That cost is increasing by $170,000 over last year. and that's a contract.
That's 170 out of that 581 there?
Yes.
Okay.
Just residential recycling is a $170,000 increase over the prior year. And then we have, you know, our vehicle repairs and maintenance, parts and supplies is up by $25,000 overall, and I think anybody who's dealt with the supply shortages out there knows that car parts and all that have continued to rise. Culture and recreation, is that mostly the library? Some of the
It's
maintenance there?
library and Park and Rec.
Because that I don't have
Culture.
pulled out.
A lot of that, again, is labor costs with the increase in the minimum wage. We had to bring the camp counselors up, the lifeguards at the pool up. Also, I'll caution, when you do,
Oh, you gotta turn, maybe, or speak louder.
the other thing I caution, when you do look at the salary line items in the book, we have 6 unions, and all their contracts ran out at June 30th, 2022. So if you compare this year's salary line items to what was in last year, it's actually 2 years' worth of increases for 3 of the unions: the police, the highway, and the clerical. The supervisors union, the contract was just settled last week. And I believe the dispatchers is under negotiation, so there wasn't any real increases in those line items yet, other than people going up in their years of service.
Okay.
Then I'll just add, even though it's not spiked out, the employee benefit line, to go with what John's talking about, our benefits didn't go down by $60,000. There's a line in your book, and it says, reserve for negotiation. That line item is down $115,000 because of the contracts that were settled in the prior year. So that reserve is lowered this year, and that's why that's a decrease of 60.
But that's a true number for our budget.
Absolutely.
Okay. You were throwing it there.
Oh, sorry. No, that's why that went down. It's not like our pension went down or the health. It's the reserve for
The
negotiation.
amount we had to put in reserve for the negotiations, which we place in employee benefits.
Correct.
Went from this high last year down to this high this year.
Because the
something like
contracts
that.
are settled now,
Oh,
exactly.
okay.
Yep.
So with those salary increases, is it inclusive of any of the retroactive pay if the unions just settled?
Yeah, that's what John was
Yeah.
saying. In other words, when you see the salary, that's when you see this 46% of the overall 1.4 million. All right, what was it, $623,000, something like that?
$653.
Okay. That's how come there was such a spike, because it was a 2-year settlement hit to the budget. Last year, it was kind of, I'll call it buried, but that's where we put it when we have salary for, money for negotiations that are coming, we put it in employee benefits. And that's the point Kevin was saying.
And then the last item, the town services, we had one item, which is our town property insurance, and that went up by $46,000. So that's the majority of that 58, other than just some little accounts. So that was our hit on that, on the town service end.
Okay, so in addition to what you have here, this is the board explaining what has happened in terms of the town on the revenue side, the components, and what has shifted, and in the major categories with detail, and all the detail that we work with is in this document here. All right, so without further ado, we're now going to go to, sir.
The budget looks very stable, you guys are having a good handle on revenue opportunities. When you put the budget together, it's full of assumptions, obviously. Are there any opportunities that maybe if the probability was right, that maybe we can realize during the year, that maybe you can talk about? Whatever they may be, revenue opportunities, people moving in, expansion, and any risks that you see, and I'm not talking about the economy crashing, anything like that. Do you look at it that way, or do you pretty much take it as?
No, and for next year, you know, we do have risks because of these new developments with the school system needing, you know, that's been well thought out as best as we can at the moment.
All right, we got to find the right balance of positive audience interaction and what to have at the end of the presentation. Okay. So the next one up is going to be the Orange BOE. So Vince will come up, and I'll find his presentation, and we'll get to that. And then Amity will be after Vince. Get you set up here, Vince. And let me get this off duplicate. I think it-
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's good to see everyone here. I'm just trying to look across the room of seeing what board members are here. I know Mr. Houlihan acknowledged his members. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Kraut, the board chair, and I think I see Mrs. Hadlock back there, who just came from Litchfield. Betty, thanks for rushing to be here. I also see Mrs. Deach back there, and I point her out for one reason, is because when I was appointed, she was on the board. Jody, you may not realize this, but I mention or I quote you every month, not every month, but when it's the board recognition. Now, I don't know if you remember this, and hopefully I'm quoting you correctly, is when I acknowledge the board during Board Appreciation Month, I think some people are mistaken of many boards, Selectmen, Board of Finance. But Jody, what I recall you saying is there was someone, a taxpayer who came up to you and referenced the salary you were making as a board member. So the reason why people are laughing in the crowd, because we have many elected officials, they do not get paid. This is something that they do on their own, and I want to just thank you. So again, just wanted to take a moment, because the time and effort that's spent throughout the whole entire year with events that occur, but especially on the budget, it's not just tonight. It's a mostly a yearly long process. Over. Mr. Leahy shared with me that the laser pointer unfortunately doesn't work. This is a letter that Mr. Kraut and I put together, and I want to focus on just one sentence that says, "We continue to be mindful of the educational impacts caused by the pandemic, as well as the economic burden placed on the town." The Board of Finance heard me state this already when I presented to them, and I don't know where all of you are in your mind with the occurrences of the pandemic. For me, at times, I think it was so far away. But when you kind of take a moment and a breath and take a moment to look at it, a little over a month and a half ago, or a year and 2 months ago, our board got together and unanimously voted to make masks optional. Now, to me, that seems like so crazy. It was only a year and 2 months, but it did. And when you think past that, is we had to wear a mask, meaning staff, students, to wear a mask the whole entire year. And of course, in March, students were placed at home. I think that's a great thing to be reflective about, because one of the things I'm mentioning is that there is an impact, and the pandemic has to still impact it. Now, I'm not, this is not a conversation if a masker or not a masker, I'm not getting into that. But I personally believe, as an educator, that even though we had to do things, wearing masks really created a deficiency of learning with our students, especially when we had to be on remote. So again, it's great to be back and great to be in school and the way that I think we should be. So again, these are some of the impacts that you'll see in our budget. Every board meeting, and again, credit to the Orange Board of Ed, they state the mission statement. So typically, a board creates a mission statement. They create it, and guess where it sits? On the shelf. The Orange Board of Ed states it. Now, to me, this is not just a guide, which you'll see. Anything that we say in our statements, it impacts the budget. But it also is a reminder of what we're here for, and it's because of the student. That's the only reason why we're here, is because of students. Now, my interpretation, I did not create this. I wasn't here when this was created, so kudos to the board that created this, is together we will make a difference. Now, to me, what that means is not just the board, not just the staff, but it's all of you in this room. It's all of you watching at home. It's Mr. Zioli, who, when I first came here, I said, "Vince, if you need anything, let me know." And he meant it. It's any board chair that I've talked to and said, "Vince, if you need something, don't know if I could do it, call." And they mean it. So that we is an important piece. It's taxpayers, no matter if you have kids in the district or don't have kids. Your support is immensely, and we can't do it without you, so thank you for that. Our district goals are to ensure safe and healthy environments. The safe and healthy environments have changed quite immensely. The pandemic has changed it, about what the requirements is. I'll mention briefly about the healthy environments. Sadly, threats upon schools have changed the safe and healthy environments. As we said, we're here for our students. We want to engage, empower them, and that's through a pandemic, not through a pandemic. We are here to engage them, hopefully build resilience, and empower them to be effective as they get older and start their lives as an adult. And we do that by strengthening and teaching learning, and that's the professional learning we provide not only for teachers, but all our staff. As I shared with you, this just doesn't happen. This starts back in September. For those of you that don't know, typically a superintendent meets with their principals, and again, thank you to all the principals and our directors who've done their work to prepare this budget. I presented to the board. It's a superintendent budget at that time. The board goes back and forth in conversations. They vote on it, then becomes the board presentation. We present it to the Board of Finance, and we are here today. So again, it's a lengthy process as you see. I like to share this piece, and again, I apologize for the laser printer and for those that can't see. Well, not that you can't see, but could have difficulty seeing from where you're sitting. So prior to my arrival, the guidance that the Board of Finance gave to the interim superintendent is, don't predict enrollment. Tell us what you have currently. And that's what we've done, and I've continued that process. So something that you'll see, hey, Chris, do you mind if I pull this mic off? Is that going to mess you up? Could I do that? So what you'll see here is that when we present the budget to the Board of Finance, again, you'll see, where am I looking here? Student budget at that top line. And then it's student actual. Our student enrollment has always increased, no matter what we presented. Again, what we had when we currently present to the Board of Finance. But by the time school starts, we've always had more enrollment. The only year that you will see a difference where we had less students is during the pandemic, where families decided to withdraw their child out of the school because they thought it was safer to homeschool them. And then, so you see that, right? You got it. So again, we like to share this with you about where we are, where we continue to be, and the increase in our student enrollment. Just an overall, we've talked about increases. Mr. Lay has gotten into it, and also Mr. Houlihan. We're asking for a 3.37% increase this year. This is a pie chart. Typically, you see this in every budget. And to no surprise, the salaries and benefits are the most. And quite frankly, that's where we need to invest our money for our students. I call it the human capital. As I said, it's a we. I don't care who you are, but especially during what we faced with the pandemic, no matter if you're our owner or our operators here, how many schools could not open because they didn't have bus drivers? Just recently, this happened 2 days ago in a district because not enough people showed up. How many schools couldn't open because when a teacher or someone was sick that they didn't have enough staff? So again, thank you to the board to supporting about systems that we put in place. And again, this is more contractual obligations, but you'll see that in the next slide or two that you'll see increases, and again, it's predominantly with salary and benefits. So major drivers, as I shared, salaries and benefits, support staff. Mr. Houlihan mentioned this, and I mentioned this with regarding our goals. Many years ago, the board was being proactive regarding safety in our schools. We had several conversations with Chief Gagné. Again, he's part of the we of why we make a difference here. And thank you to Mr. Chief Gagné for his support. And he guided the board to hire school security officers. For those of you that don't know what a school security officer, say that 10 times fast, it's similar to an armed security officer. It's synonymously with each other. It's a person who is a retired state trooper or police officer in good standing that could be hired in a school system and is allowed to carry a weapon. So these conversations occurred, I think it was probably 6 years ago. Again, I think there was some trepidation when any time that came up. Sadly, events continue to occur in our country. The board made a move to do this, and this is one of the reasons why you see an impact in our budget. I have to say, this was, even though I think there's still trepidation, I think the majority of our families have appreciated this. And during any time, well, besides the pandemic, I received several emails. But quite frankly, whenever there was a shooting, there were calls immediately. Are there police presence at the school? Are there police presence at the school? So this is one of the impacts that Mr. Houlihan inferred. But again, support staff, that's one of the reasons why you'll see an increase. Some other items, as you know, transportation, again, that's contractual. Building repairs and maintenance, that's the other part about the safety of schools. There's a requirement that all districts have to have comply with an HVAC assessment. It's quite costly, so that's the reason why you see that cost. Utilities, everyone's experiencing that. And we're addressing some furniture needs that have been long, not forgotten, but because we've had to address certain things first, we've put that back in the budget. Decreases. For those of you that are not familiar with school systems, specifically special education, a student has to qualify for special education. Once they qualify for special education, there's goals and objectives that are set in an IEP and an individualized education plan. And the goal for any district is to have an LRE. That stands for a least restrictive environment. And many districts do a very good job with that. I think Orange does a good job. But on occasion, the needs that a student has, a district can't provide, and when a student has to be outplaced. Not only are they being outplaced to a different school, transportation has to be provided. Now, we could get a student, and again, our goal is always to, again, when I was a principal and we would have a meeting, a PPT, with regarding a student, our goal was never to keep someone to be a special education student forever. Sometimes that occurs, but again, it's trying to provide those services and get them back into the classrooms or to decrease what their goals or objectives are. And that could happen in a year's time, it could happen in 2 years' time, or they could promote out and go into the Amity district. So those are some of the reasons what occurs, why you see an influx or decrease in that line item. And our health insurance decreased. I don't know if many of you know, we are self-insured as a town, and it's based on claims year to year. So our claims were lower this year than previous years, and that's why you see a decrease in that line item. Again, a 3.37% increase. That pie chart, contractual obligations are alone are 1.21%. And I want to, again, thank you for your continuous support, and we respectfully ask for that 3.3% increase. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the second of the three things that we were going to be discussing that have to do with the components of the budget. And the next one's the Amity budget, and I see that Jen is here, I believe. All right, so we're about ready to go. So Jen, here is the clicker, and I'll get it set up for you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for being out here and for taking the time to listen to the presentation. It's actually kind of nice following Dr. Scarpetti because he explained a lot of how a school district budget is created, and it honestly doesn't matter whether you are a K-6 town school district or if you are a 7 to 12 regional district. Much of the process, many of the pie charts look exactly the same, just with different numbers. Like Dr. Scarpetti, I'd like to thank the Amity board members who represent the town of Orange who are here with us this evening. There's our board chair, Mr. Paul Davis, our chair of the Amity Finance Committee, Mr. Christopher Brow, and I also see sitting quietly in the back, Ms. Torillo and Ms. Eichler. So thank you very much for coming out and being here tonight to support the budget. Again, like Orange, our Board of Education's budget is grounded in the mission of the schools as well as the goals. And goal number one, if you think of it, is really the focus on providing students with an excellent academic experience in a comprehensive middle high school district. Goal number three is really supporting a supportive climate for not only our students, but as well as for our staff and for our entire community. And our second goal is really focused on doing that in a way that pays attention to our taxpayers and making sure that we are as efficient as possible in providing an excellent experience for our students, but also making sure that we do so with an effective use of the resources that we're provided with. We are also very much focused on our BOA Portrait of the Graduate, and I say BOA rather proudly because the development of the Portrait of the Graduate truly was a pre-K through grade 12 initiative. We solicited opinions not just from the Amity parents or the Amity students, but we did reach out to our elementary districts, our elementary teachers, our elementary families. We reached out to business leaders. We reached out to our secondary postgraduate resources and made sure that when we developed our Portrait of the Graduate, it was reflective not just of our own 7 through 12 vision, but what we wanted our entire community to have for our students when they actually leave not just Amity, but our entire pre-K through 12 educational system. We are also committed to providing, again, a comprehensive high school experience. That means that we do, first and foremost, focus on our academics and the academic experiences that our students have, but we also pay attention to the fact that we want to make sure they are provided with an excellent athletic experience as well as an excellent experience in the arts. Just a couple quick examples of what that means. We have one team that has just gone on to the National Academic Decathlon. They competed in Houston, I think this week, because they basically won their division in Connecticut and have gone on to the Nationals. We have one team that has gone on to the International Business Competition. So they don't get to travel overseas. They have to go to Pennsylvania, but they are they are number one of 14,000 schools that are competing in this competition. And then, thank you, our math team just placed first in the state of Connecticut and is now going on to our New England math competition. When we look at SAT scores and we compare Amity to the other schools that are very similar to us, what we call our DERG, we had the highest math SAT scores from last year's testing. We were number one in our math SATs, and we were tied for second for our English SATs. When you put those all together, we were probably the top scoring school, but they don't look at it quite that way. Athletics, I can say right now that every single one of our spring sports teams, I believe, has a winning record. It was at least when I met with Mr. Goodwin at the start of this week. And when we talk about the arts, if you did not have an opportunity to see Beauty and the Beast, you missed out on something phenomenal. If you did, you will know and understand what our commitment is to the visual and performing arts for our students. We do project our revenues and our expenses are going to net out to zero. So we'll get into some more details of this, but there is a very nice thick budget book if you want to look at every single line item and what is driving both those expenses and the revenues. But in sort of a quick overview, and again, this is remarkably similar to what Dr. Scarpetti just mentioned, we have some primary budget drivers that essentially dictate how a school district budget is developed. One of our biggest drivers that we haven't often talked about is the change in commodities and inflation. As of February, it was up 6%. I think that's dropped a little bit in the past couple of months, but this is certainly impacting us, whether we're talking about our supplies or our utilities or some of the contractual fees that we have. We also have contractual increases. That includes the salaries and the services that we have contracts for, as well as healthcare costs, which really come down to some of the contracts we have for all of our employees. Personnel and the personnel that we need to run the district and how that changes contributes to the budget. Pupil services, or commonly referred to as special education, technology, capital projects, and our enrollment. So looking at something slightly different than the pie chart, but same concept, if you figure about 2/3 of our budget is tied up in the personnel, which would be both their salaries and their benefits, I think one of the things that's really important to notice is that the red line represents the budget increase that we're asking for. The blue line represents how much of an increase is tied into the contract. And again, it's that combination of salaries and benefits. The real simple explanation to this is that when the blue line ends up higher than the red line, we're making reductions in other areas. And so this year, our blue line is higher than our red line. In fact, most of the time, the blue line's higher than the red line. Every once in a while, you have to make a course correction. But this year, it's particularly remarkable that we were able to do that, given the inflation that we're seeing in our commodities and our utilities. Our personnel fiscal impact, it's kind of sort of looking almost like it's not quite as dramatic as it could be. We are adding a middle school math interventionist that will be shared between both middle schools. Dr. Scarpetti talked about some of the impacts that we're seeing from the pandemic. We see it up at Amity because the students from the elementary schools come on up to us. It's modeled after the same strategy that we've used to help develop students who are struggling in reading. So we will have a certified teacher who is able to provide direct instruction to students who are having struggles in mathematics, and that person will be supported with a paraeducator. So that way on the days the person is in Orange Middle School, the paraeducator is at the Bethany Middle School, and then they will flip-flop on the other days to make sure our students have a continuous support. We're requesting an additional 0.6 world language teacher, specifically for Mandarin Chinese. This is solely based on the requests of our students. So we have more students who are interested in taking Chinese classes. We need to offer more sections if we want to provide our students with what they're interested in, and so we need to add a Mandarin Chinese teacher. We're also reducing 2 teaching positions. We're reducing an English teacher at the high school. This is not a person that we are cutting their position. They're not getting fired. It's actually somebody who has already resigned from the district. When we looked at our enrollments and how we were able to structure our schedule, we knew we could reduce that position. It doesn't mean we offer a less variety of courses. It just might mean some of the classes actually have a few more kids inside of them. But we will still have the same program of studies. We will still offer the same opportunities for students, but with slightly bigger class sizes. But we're still within our contractual limits. We're not talking about, classes where the kids don't have desks or seats. Something just very reasonable so we can support our students. We have a reduction also in a visual arts teacher. This one's sort of more similar to reducing because of student interest. So after February, when our students selected all their courses for next year, we looked at how many students were interested in taking the visual arts classes. We realized again that we could offer the same breadth of our program of studies, but we didn't have to have an additional arts teacher to do that. Again, this was a position that somebody, we knew they were leaving at the end of this school year, so it's not anybody losing a job, but we were able to make that adjustment based on our student interest. We also currently have 5 positions in the district, primarily in the area of supporting students' mental health, that were hired with grant monies that came as a result of the pandemic. What we knew would happen is that if we just paid them solely out of the grant, at some point, if we wanted to keep those people, it was going to be a big impact on the budget. So when we started to employ those people 3 years ago, we had most of their salary paid by the grant and a very tiny bit in the operational budget. Then we adjusted it to about 50-50, then it became about 75-25, and so at this point we would assume 100% of that cost in the operational budget. But again, these are staff that we have used in our district to support our students for the past 3 years, and they have done an exceptional job in working with our kids. We have a couple paraeducators that really are a net cost of zero. One will be reassigned to a different position. The other will actually be paid for by a different local education agency. So those have a sort of net cost, but again, moving our staff to meet the needs of our students. We are adding a tutor in our sales program, which is at the middle school. That is, again, based on enrollment. So our sales program helps some of our students with a really high level of special education needs. There are students who need the most supports throughout the course of their day. And when you add more of them into the program, you actually need more adults to help support them. We are looking at funding an in-school suspension tutor so that it would be a district-wide position. This will help because currently middle school students, there is really no supervision when they receive in-school suspension. They just kind of float around from office to office and hope that somebody is going to be able to watch them in a conference room or a counseling office. From the high school perspective, it is a teacher duty, but by creating a district-wide position, now our teachers will be able to have some other duties and make sure our students have supervision in other areas. And then lastly, an administrative assistant really to help with a new state program for maintaining our special education records. Our pupil services expenses often drive our budget, and much like the Board of Ed for Orange, they went down for the fiscal year 23-24. Somewhat of a similar reason as well. We have worked really hard to build programs that operate in our district for our students who have the highest level of need. And it's been taken multiple years to get those programs established. You can't do them all at once, and so you build them up slowly. But what we are finally seeing is the fruition of when you don't have to pay for a student to go to a out-of-district placement, basically somebody else's school, and when you don't have to transport them there and pay their tuition and pay all of the associated costs, but you can keep that kid there in your own district, in their own schools, with their own peers, in our own classrooms, you actually realize a cost savings. And after about 5 years of developing multiple programs throughout the district, we're starting to realize the cost savings of in-district programs. Our technology fiscal impact is really more of a maintenance impact. We became a one-to-one district. We were doing it really slowly until 2020, 21, and then all of a sudden we did it overnight. But at this point, it's not something that we want to turn back from. Our students have a wealth of resources available to them through their one-to-one devices. However, in order to support that, you need to keep making sure that you have one-to-one devices when the old ones break. You need software to help support that. The other thing that we really are in desperate need of this year, and we have a plan for it, are the instructional display boards. They can be something as simple as a really large screen TV like this. They can also be as complex as touch screen Promethean boards that allow teachers to do some incredible, usually math instruction. But we started purchasing those probably about 9 to 10 years ago, and some of them haven't been replaced. And as anybody knows, if you have a computer that's 9 to 10 years old, they start to fail and just don't quite work the way you want them to. So we are looking at replacing those. We do have specialized labs, so besides the one-to-one devices, there are certain classes that have specialized labs, and those require replacement. I don't know if anybody has happened to catch any of the news articles about the amazing photography work that our students are doing at Amity. But yeah, big clap for that. But they've been restoring photos that were lost as to families as a result of the hurricane in Florida. They've been featured on national news, local news, all over the place. In order to do that, they need some really high quality software, computers, printers, and so that's what a specialized lab is. But a specialized lab also affords our students opportunities that they wouldn't necessarily be able to find elsewhere. And then the infrastructure is kind of the not so flashy side of technology. It's the Wi-Fi, the switches, the wires, and that make everything run. That also has a shelf life of about 7 to 9 years, and we did replace ours. And given the volume of technology that we have running on it, we anticipate it will have to be upgraded at some point. Rather than have a large ticket item come in a budget in 1 year, we are looking at sort of trying to set aside money and save for that, because frankly, I don't believe we could operate the schools without the technology infrastructure that we currently have. When we have, at the end of the year, funds that we didn't spend, we are permitted by state law to put them into a capital reserve account. Turned out that we did have a lot of funds left over. At the end of 1920, we didn't operate the school for a third of the year. And so we didn't spend a lot of the money that we had hoped to spend, and there was money left over. At the end of even 2021, when we were first getting back, we were kind of operating half-time. Half days, we didn't have a lot of sports programs running, we didn't do any field trips. And so at the end of that year, there was money left over. When we have those unexpended funds, some of that we were returning to the towns, or I think as Mr. Leahy maybe alluded to, or maybe it was Mr. Houlihan, we have a different process for crediting the towns that money now, so that it gets back into the town reserves. But we also set it aside for capital projects. And capital projects help us keep the schools in decent shape, so that way we are able to continue to open our doors. It helps us because we don't have to bond for those projects, and it allows us to kind of plan out where we need to pay the most attention to our buildings. Which, by the way, as a regional school district, we actually are responsible for maintaining those buildings, whereas Dr. Scarpetti works with the town, but the town owns and is responsible for maintaining the town school buildings. So what have we done since 2021? Well, the first thing we did was replace all of the roofs at the high school. They were leaking terribly. We were able to get an assessment and repair those roofs so that we have another 20 years, is that correct, of life on those roofs before we have to start to think about, do we replace them? And if anybody in here has ever owned a home and had to replace a roof, you know that that is a high-cost expense, but also this would have been a good savings for us to have done that. We are currently in the process of renovating our lecture hall. Again, that's a room at the high school. Think of it kind of like a mini auditorium, but it had not been renovated since 1996. We literally had pieces of the room fall off of the wall. And so at this point, it's honestly totally gutted, and we are looking to have that renovated for the start of next school year. And then last year's funds, we purchased some musical instruments that were badly needed by our middle school students, not like a flute or a clarinet, but think of like tubas and timpanis, things that kids don't necessarily bring home on the bus with them, but they still need them to learn how to play their musical instruments in the band. We continue to do some of the lecture hall work, but again, most importantly, we looked at replacement of the middle school roofs, which are leaking over the gyms, and that's actually kind of a double-edged sword, because when a roof leaks over a gym onto a hardwood floor, you're actually not just needing to replace the roof, you also have to replace the hardwood floor. So that, again, was what I hope the townspeople consider a good use of those capital funds, so that way we can keep our school buildings in good shape. Our enrollment is what drives sort of the town's allocation to the budget. And honestly, we look back at enrollment for the 2 years that sort of come before the year that we're actually budgeting for. So we compare the enrollment from October 2021 to the enrollment of October 2022 to plan the budget for 2023-24. I think you saw in Dr. Scarpetti's slide kind of that there's an increase of enrollment that you start to see going through the elementary schools. Well, we project our enrollment for next school year is also increasing because those kids are coming up to us. However, what you do see in this slide is how changes in enrollment can impact the town's budget. So in this case, and it's just proportionality, in this case, all 3 towns saw a decrease in enrollment. It's just that Bethany and Woodbridge had small decreases in enrollment, and Orange had a large decrease in enrollment, which actually drives the budget to go below 0. This is very similar to Dr. Scarpetti's slide. The left kind of reinforces there's a lot of meetings that go into building a budget. They start in September, they end in March, and it's the exact same process that he described. The key takeaway points that I hope that you get is that from the initial requests that we received from principals and department chairs, we reduced the budget by about 50%. The overall increase or the ask. The Board of Education and the Amity Board of Finance adopted or recommended the same budget. That's very important. The way our bylaw is written is that the Amity Board of Finance puts forth a recommendation to the Board of Ed. And when the Board of Ed adopts what the Amity Finance Committee recommends, we're all copacetic, everything's great, we move on, and we're happy. When they don't, there becomes a back and forth where we sort of negotiate to try to find the spot where we can all agree that we have a good budget going forward. This year, we were able to get to that agreement right out of the gate, right on our timeline, and everybody was supportive of the budget that we present tonight. And then finally, the current proposed Amity budget is roughly about, the increase is about half of what the average state increase is. So I have some specific numbers, but when you compare us to all the other Board of Ed proposed budgets, our increase is about 50% of theirs. So in terms of our allocations, overall, the budget increase that we are looking at is 2.25% higher than our current fiscal year budget. The overall impact to the town of Orange is that we are actually asking for about $264,000 less money in order to operate the Amity budget. And like I said, that 2.25 is compared to the latest average, which was the end of March of 4.76. So thank you for your support for our schools, for our Amity students, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen.
Thank you.
All right, hopefully that stays for you, Jim.
Well, if we rely on me to figure it out, I don't think that's going to be a very good idea. Good, thank you. All right, so here we are. Okay, so about 30 minutes ago, I said that we would give you a summary of what would be coming. Then the town, John and Kevin particularly, gave you a lot in the town budgets, operations. Oh, okay, thank you, Chris. And then we had Vince on Orange Board of Education, Jen, Amity, and the Amity Board of Education. So now we'll have a couple of slides on the overall sense of the budget. This now looks back a little bit at the town, but these are the town budget, which includes both OBOE and Amity, okay? What we invest our money in over the years. This is a 9-year look. And you can see the various components from general government on the left, pass through the last two, employee benefits and education, and then town services. And I guess to no one's surprise, the trends of increases are really in two areas. Obviously, the employee benefits side, all right? A lot of that could be pensions, it could be medical and dental, could be other factors as well, insurance being one. And also in the education side, you invest a significant amount of money in education. Other things to be aware of in terms of the employee benefits, which is a major category, but in this year, as we mentioned earlier, it went down. But the two parts of it that go up significantly are the health and life insurance, although in the past years, you see by the circle on the left, the graphics there show that this past year it has gone down. But the pension costs, as you can see, have more than doubled over the last 5 to 6 years. One of the other things that the Board of Finance gets involved with is capital expenditures. We have invested, I believe, it's in the book, 3 projects that are listed there for the Orange Board of Education, totaling $155,475. In the town side, I believe there were, how many, Kevin, 7 or 8? There was a number of them. Projects that total up to $358,500. And Donnie, I believe for the current year, we've invested $1.1 million or thereabouts on the currently going on paving or road maintenance there. and we will be determining, based on our finances, what the fall would look like in that time. Right, Jim? Okay. So, we spend a lot of money in paving. Quick summary. Donnie DePoyer is in the room. I sit down with Donnie, I drive some fixtures, right? He has a process. He has assessors. What would you do if you were in charge of the highways? You'd drive around and you'd say, oh, this one's good, this one's not so good, right? So he assesses the road conditions. He develops a list, right? He checks for funding. He connects back to his suppliers, and then he finalizes it and executes the plan. He just starts the process again over the winter time for the following year. So he comes up with a list. He plans to do a certain number. Maybe he gets them all done. Maybe he does an extra one. That's my graphic to display that. What you may not know is, and I did not know, but perhaps many of you do, but the operating process for road maintenance is you first have to take out those basin heads, we call them, Donnie, right? Basin heads, the sewers, I guess I might say, if I was a city kid. And then you go and do the paving, all right, after you take off the materials. Now, there are 3 types of paving methods, if you didn't know, and I didn't. So there's overlay, there's mill, and there's reclaiming. And they're not all the same cost. Nor should they be if you only have a road that doesn't, get used that much. And you can see the types of costs over to the right-hand side here. So I don't want to get into too much detail. This is kind of an overview of the situation. But that's what I learned from sitting with Donnie a couple of times, and I wanted to share that. In terms of specifically this year, we have a spring list. You've probably seen around town that a lot of it's going on right now. Karen Drive down here, I think, is one, just as a number of them. Yeah, there it is there, doing a milling in the left-hand side. And Donnie has a list for the right-hand side, and as the note in the gray box says, this will be dependent on funds available. All right? What I would also like to do, in a final one on road maintenance, we asked, actually it was this morning, I asked John, can we get a history of a couple of years back, how much we've spent on this? So here's the data. Comes in an Excel file, you make a graph, you pretty it up, there's your data. What you can see from 2015 to this year, only half a year though, spring, right? There's the $1.1 million on the right-hand side. And you can see that we've been averaging, the average is $1,567,814 over this 8.5-year period. And I think there was something special, John, maybe you could educate me more on the 2015 situation, just a little bit, please.
I think that was the year we had bonding money, and we used bonding money to pay for the paving.
Is that your memory, Jim? Bonding money was 2000 back?
We bond money, usually enough money to last, $5 million is for roads when we do it, and it usually lasts 4 years.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, this is the money that, these figures came from Art. So if we got issues with the numbers, it came out today. But I thought I wanted you to know that over this 8-year period, 8.5, over $13 million is what it totaled up to be. Okay? So I just thought that would be useful for a piece of information for people who pay taxes in this town to know. All right, this is not this year's chart, this is last year's chart, but it kind of tends to sum up, and I want to give my colleagues credit that, particularly in this case, Kevin Moffett, here are the components. We got Amity in the yellow, we've got Orange BOE in blue, we got the town departments, we got a little bit of capital and debt, all right? And that was what we had in our budget last year, the 1 year we're operating in now. And from our point of view, Board of Finance, we have to consider all parts of stuff in the budget, right? I think that was one of the earliest charts in this presentation. We have to, our schools, our capital needs, and all of our town departments. And another slide, in terms of education, Kevin, I had talked to Kevin, he mentioned this, and I said, hey, that's a good quote. We know education's important. We all have gone through education in whatever town we grew up in. Whether we have children in the school systems, ever had or still have, we still support it through our taxes. So it is important, and it's about 2/3 of our budget, all right? It's about 63% by the numbers, but on the OBOE side, we take care of the building, so there's some component of that
Yeah, I was
factor.
going to say, that's why if you look, you don't want to say, oh, Amity's that much higher than Orange, because they maintain their own buildings, where we maintain the buildings for the schools in Orange.
Yeah, they have
So,
debt.
so they're probably
Principal
on
and
par
interest
when
they
you
have
add
to
those
do every
costs.
year, right? Okay, so that's a little bit. So what does this budget mean to you? There it is, the same slide we showed earlier, the bottom line. Now it's not up front, it's in the back. Now, I don't know where the average retail value, I was smiling at Kevin earlier tonight when I said, wish I had an average retail value of $355, right? There's not a lot of them around in Orange, but that was the last time we did the reval, right? That was 5 years ago. So 70% of that turns out to be that 248 number. This is the same slide we've used each year. The yellow will change when we do the reval next year. And then you have a mill rate. So you just multiply whatever your assessed value is by the mill rate, and there's your taxes. Right? Mine happens to be just a hair under $7,000. But the average per that number there would be, in 2021-22, would be $82.74. This current year, for that particular theoretical home, I guess you could say, it would be at $32.71, this year's mill rate, all right? It would be $81.40. So reduced by $134. This year, what we're proposing to support the funding that, in the budgets that you just saw, the three different types, that sum up to the total, all right, is that 32.31 mils will support what you've seen on requests for spending. That would be $8,040, which would be a reduction of $100, which Kevin, I think we calculated in our meeting, was 1.22% reduction. Remember when we started this presentation, we had 2.83 on the mill rate increase, 2.4% in the spending, so it sort of suggests it should come out somewhere in that model, part of the universe. There's the history of the mill rates. So when you get a copy of this presentation, I'm sure John will make it available, PDF file. You can have that in your records. And now we have next steps. Okay, we have 2 referendum dates. Got to vote. First, calendars. Under Amity, on the Amity budget in the yellow there, they had their district meeting on April 3rd, and the taxpayer vote is on May 2nd. So that would be 10, 12 days from now, right? I guess 12 days, right, Thursday to Tuesday. Okay. On the right-hand side, we have tonight's town budget meeting. All good? And then we have the annual town meeting. It's on May 10th, I believe, right? And then we have the vote, the taxpayer vote on the town budget. All right, the overall budget. And that's on the 17th. So that's, Kevin, Mr. Chairman, and team, that's what we have to present to you tonight. The opportunity for you to come up, please sign in, as this indicates, introduce yourself, and just sign in over here. I know one gentleman's already signed up, so I know he'll be first. And then whoever else wants to come up, make a comment, ask a question, whatever. We don't have...
Relating to the budget, too.
Okay. Now, is the gentleman still here who signed up? I don't think I see him.
Good evening. Mitch Goldblatt, 291 Drummond Road. To the members of the Board of Finance and their staff, thank you for all the hard work you do, the time you've put into this budget. It is very much appreciated. I have 4 items to address this evening. The first one is we can all help to reduce our expenses by participating this Saturday in Shredding Day. Get those mattresses out of the house, the hazardous waste out of the house, the old documents out of the house. Let's get them recycled, let's get them reused, and let's not put them into the waste stream where it is bad for the environment and also bad for our pocketbooks. Number 2, on behalf of the Orange Recycling Committee, we've requested that a part-time recycling attendant be added to this budget. Many other communities have personnel to assist residents with their materials, and we should as well. Our recycling rates keep dropping, and we still have a significant contamination in our recyclables, as well as recyclables going into the hopper and being thrown out. look into our recycling bins and see the plastic bags and styrofoam, as well as other items that don't belong, despite numerous signs, web page notifications, and newspaper articles. Please consider this reasonable request. Number 3, Mr. Leahy, thank you very much for that education on road repairs. I think it's very educational to most. Please increase this item by over $500,000 to the level we had last year at least, and maybe before, because prices are going up across the board. We should not have to wait until roads are literally crumbling before us and become an embarrassment to our neighborhoods before they are repaired and repaved. Right now, at least 2 roads are being completely reclaimed, as Jim had pointed out, because we as a town have allowed them to get so bad. And it costs so much more to reclaim the roads than it would to repave. So a normal repaving schedule that keeps up with the roads will cost us less in the long run and get more roads repaved as we do it each year. Number 4. Now, let's address the 800-pound gorilla in this room, Amity. We should consider and keep in mind that this is our high school. This is our middle school. Amity has been consistently in the black. Last time I looked at a balance sheet, this was a good thing. Yet the Board of Finance repeatedly criticizes them. I have read the facts, or alternative facts, laid out by Mr. Leahy in several newspaper articles. While he says it is just the data, his intent is to lower the Amity budget by defeating it at a referendum. Now, let's look at the data and the facts. We have been told tonight that there will be a tax decrease. Congratulations. And I think we're all happy about that. But how is this possible? The town government spending is going up by 5.5%. The Orange Board of Education budget is going up by 3.37%. And the Amity budget is going up by just 2.25%, less than half of the increase of the town budget. And because of enrollment figures, we are going to see a drop of $264,000 in the Amity budget to the town, which is going to assist us, as well as the grand list increase, to have a tax decrease this year. But does Amity get any credit? No. What we get is headlines that scream at us, Amity budget surplus remains unreasonable. That's what shouts the headline. Unreasonable to whom? Last year's Amity surplus was $1.5 million, or less than 3% of their total budget. The last audited fiscal year of the town budget in 2022, the town budget, not including education, had a surplus of $727,955. Also, less than 3% of the total budget. Is the town surplus unreasonable? I don't think so. So therefore, why would Amity's be unreasonable? There's not enough time tonight to pull apart all of Mr. Leahy's biased conclusions. But let's look at the town budget when you use his logic of rolling in surpluses. By his same math, the town of Orange needed less money in fiscal year 2022 as was used in fiscal year 2021. No one is accusing the Board of Finance of overtaxing the residents. Or should we? Because that's what we've done to Amity. We have an audited 22% undesignated fund balance, probably among the highest in the state of Connecticut. Why? Because like Amity, we have had some significant surpluses that we should be proud of. It is time to stop the personal crusade against Amity. It is time to hold yourselves to the same standards and stop the silly accusations. Recognize that the laws are different for the boards of education and just accept it. You don't hold Orange Board of Ed to the same scrutiny, nor should you. As for the opinion pieces that are somehow supposed to be based on facts and data, stop. For the sake of our town, for the sake of our region, stop. And oh, by the way, whether Amity returns the money to the town or uses it to reduce next year's budget, as they are doing now, is basically the same thing. We're still getting the money back, except it will no longer go into our own undesignated fund balance. In conclusion, I hope that you will take into consideration my requests for the town budget, but in any case, I will support it and ask others to do so, because it is a reasonable and responsible budget that recognizes the needs of our community. By the same token, I will support the Amity budget and ask others to do so because it is a reasonable and responsible budget that recognizes the needs of the community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Wieelander, and I live at 377 Dogwood Road. I have a couple questions, and then I just wanted to say something quickly. I was wondering if, in one of the earlier slides, it indicated that $219,000 was being cut from the budget for the town, or being reduced, that the town's budget was being reduced by 219. Would we be able to find out what services are going to be either cut or how that money was recouped?
I don't know where do you know where that was?
You can go through.
It's yeah. I just don't, we have a great town with a lot of really great resources, and I just don't want to lose that.
It's not in the
I think-
document, John.
I think,
Not?
Mayor,
That's the PDF thing that you sent out. What I could say
Mary,
is-
if you go through each of the departments, you can see the department
Okay.
request and the Board of Finance final approval. I think probably part of it is in the Public Works Department. They requested a body, another maintenance person that was cut out. I think that was
Oh, there was a couple of those,
65,000
yeah.
of, yeah, and there might have been another place too. I'm not sure. But if you go through the
Okay.
different departments, you'll see it.
So it's more efficiencies rather than a major cut to
Correct,
any services or programs?
Yes,
Okay.
that did not happen.
Perfect, thank you. And then the other question I had was the $170,000 increase in the residential recycling cost. That's something we should anticipate continuing to grow based on the transportation and the
There-
weight costs? Is that,
The town's contract with the recycling pickup coordinator ran out, I think it was June of '21, Bob? And it wasn't in the current year budget, and it's now put into the one
Okay.
that will start on July 1.
okay, thank you for that. It's just something to really be aware of.
Mary,
Yeah,
just on that, just so you know, the town pays for every house in town, but we only have about a 35% participation rate. So even if you don't put your blue bin out, or if you take it to the transfer station yourself, we're paying for your house regardless. That's how the contract is, every residential in town.
that sounds like a new goal that we should try to aim for, is a higher participation rate. So, all right, let's,
Don't forget, a lot of people do bring it to the transfer station without bidding.
So your
Okay.
employee shouldn't go to the transfer station, they should go door to door.
I don't know if that would be considered an efficiency. The last thing I wanted to say is, has to do just with our school budgets. I'm here tonight as a parent. I'm here tonight as a former Orange Board of Ed member. I'm here tonight also as a state rep who serves on the education committee for the state. In addition to having 3 kids, they're in 3 different schools. I have one at Racebrook, I have one at the middle school in Orange, and one at the high school. So it's a lot of information that we get all the time, and I appreciate everything that has been done for my children and the kids of our community. My perspective of being able to speak tonight is one that is rather broad, because it's not just as a parent, I've been able to be exposed to schools across the state and what those districts are able to provide for their students versus what we are able to provide for our students. And I know that what we provide for our students is not free, and it is a responsibility and a request that we are asking of residents, myself included. But I really hope that we can start looking at it as not an expense, but an investment. Our kids are so well prepared going forward, starting from pre-K through Amity graduation. I recently was on a tour with the Amity at the middle school up in Bethany. It was snowed out the day for Orange, so I couldn't torment my daughter at the middle school, but I was looking for my son at the high school, and he successfully hid from me. But I was able to see opportunities that our kids get that I literally did not know existed. And it is something that it's technology, it's support by educators, it is just the community that they are provided with that supports them, that allows them to be successful, and allows them to be interested and curious and have more opportunities than most people in the state that I have seen. The things that we are able to give our kids, we should be so proud of. And again, I know it is not without a cost, but it is an absolute investment, not only in their future, but our town's future, because our schools are successful, people want to move to our towns, and our property values stay high, and we are seen as a very valuable community. So I just wanted to say thank you to our educators who are here for creating these budgets, for putting them forward, all of the people who have worked on it in the different Board of Eds. And just as another little shout out for Amity, Amity recently participated, Dr. Byers and I cannot remember his name, but another professional educator at Amity recently participated in a conference that we had, a communication that we had with the state legislature, because our transition program, the one that Dr. Byers referenced about the 5-year program that is bringing in services into our in-house, is currently being used as a model for the state. This is massive legislation that we are putting forward it is 5001 is the priority for the House, and looking at how our transition academies are preparing our students better than almost anyone else in the state. And so we should be so proud. When I was on the Board of Ed, we talked about it as a side effect of success, that families that need their children who are their most vulnerable to be supported, they move to Orange because we take care of our kids. And I implore everyone to support it, because both of our budgets, the town, we have a great town. Thank you for your work on the Board of Finance for doing this. All of the different town boards who are here, it's a team effort and mostly volunteer. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to just thank you, and please support all of our schools when we go to referendum.
Good evening, friends and neighbors. My name is Sylvester Salcido, 851 Shagbark Drive. This evening I came here with the intention of seeing whether I would hear my favorite phrase of this school year, which is DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And as you all know, we've been sitting here for a couple of hours. To my great disappointment, I didn't hear it once. So I'm thinking, does this mean that I can keep This Veteran Supports DEI in the Amity budget this year? I just polished it off, took all the cobwebs off from the basement. But on a happy note, I'm glad that it seems that there is concurrence on both sides of the political aisle here in Orange regarding the budget for this year. And so I'm really, really delighted to hear that and see everybody here tonight. And I certainly want to express my personal thanks on behalf of my family for what everybody does, both as a volunteer and those of our elected and paid officials, and all those who work, obviously, for our schools. However, following up on that, given my disappointment, I do want to share with you, just to take a few more moments here, that last Friday, I went to the Coast Guard Academy in down the street in London, and they had this program that just came across my email last weekend called Eclipse 2023, and I didn't really know what it meant, but all I saw in the phrasing there somewhere that they were going to talk about DEI. So I thought, well, my wife and the kids went off to New Mexico for the spring vacation, and instead of mowing the lawn or doing something constructive in the house, I said, well, let me take a little ride to New London. And to my great surprise, there's actually the opening keynote speech is something that I'm trying to find out if we can share over our OGAT system, because I really think there was a brigadier general, a real Southern gentleman, and he really, he's a he's a brigadier general in the U.S. Army, retired, and he's now a adjunct professor, or I guess a full professor at the Hamilton College. And his big mission in life is basically to tear down the myths of the Confederacy and how that has really, the fact that we as a nation have not come to grips with the Confederacy and how it's basically an insurrectionist group who were defeated, and they should really be defeated completely the same way that the Germans dealt with their own difficult history with Hitler. So with that, what I would like to be able to just follow up on that idea is that at the Coast Guard Academy, and you can imagine there are cadets there from all across the country, plus some international students, cadets or midshipmen rather. But the key is that I believe there is a lot about DEI that must continue to be addressed, not only in our schools, but within ourselves as a community, and I'd like to see it at all our departments here in town. The police, the fire department, public works, our health department, because I think it's healthy for us to come to face with that reality that as Americans, I think I agree with the Brigadier General that we really haven't come to terms with our experience during the Civil War and what that whole history and how the Confederacy and how that continues to poison our national dialogue and our national sense of being able to construct a more perfect union. Thank you, friends and neighbors.
Hi, good evening. I'm Anna Mann, 965 Orange Center Road, and kind of like Mary, I have a variety of experiences and perspectives, so I just wanted to kind of take a moment to share my appreciation and my thanks for all of the hard work of all the work that you've done and on the Board of Finance side and on the town side, and certainly that of our educators. And I was an English teacher, so I'm going to start with a rhetorical question. What better investment as homeowners, residents, and parents than in our children through education? Our local districts, teachers, and admins continue to deliver high-quality programs despite extremely challenging circumstances. My children, the two children that I have personally, have been the beneficiaries of the hard work and dedication of these educators both in the Orange and Amity districts. These hardworking professionals are the experts. They are dedicated to our children, to our town, and to the security of our future. We don't all have to always agree on everything, but it makes absolutely no sense to not support a budget out of spite. Working against an Amity budget, especially when that budget will cost each of us in our town less money than in years past, is the definition of cutting off our nose to spite our face. As Mr. Leahy said, we have to consider all parts of the budget, and we also know education is usually the most expensive part of most municipal budgets. I don't know if anything is worth more than investing in our children and in our future. So I'm very hopeful that you will join me in supporting the Amity budget and our children and our town by voting yes on May 2nd. Thank you very much.
Hi, Ron Kay, 90 Hall Drive. I moved here 2 years ago from a town that has a $13 billion budget and massive corruption, and nobody gave a damn about the taxpayers and delivering services to them. It has 50,000 homeless people. It has couple of million poverty-stricken people and does very little to educate or improve their lives. This is a wonderful town to me. But then I didn't hear anything creative in the budget, anything innovative. I heard the presentation from Amity School of its achievements and of innovative ideas being worked on. But it seemed to me like, from what I've seen and heard, that Orange is sort of running on autopilot. The way we did it is the way we're going to do it. And I think that it's a wonderful town that could be greater, that if there was more thought to not just saving money and counting pennies, but to paving the streets, like Mitch said, and doing other things that would improve the quality of life here and make it a really great city. Anyway, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Remember, Markham's up here, if you want to speak, just come on up and sign up.
Hi, good evening. Mark Moyer, 971 Rainbow Trail. I just wanted to say I am also the Secretary and Treasurer of the Orange Recycling Committee, and I go to the transfer station nearly every week, and I just want to reiterate that there is an awful lot of mixed recycling going into the wrong places, and I do want to back Mitch and the rest of the Recycling Committee by saying that we do need a part-time attendant to monitor and supervise, as we have been there to volunteer on Saturdays, but we do not have the authority to stop people from throwing things into the wrong bins. So it would be greatly appreciated. I know that the town is going to collect money from the miniature bottle NIPS program that can offset some of the costs used to hire a part-time attendant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So anyway, just to reiterate one more thing, sorry. So we're going to have shredding day here on Saturday. And people are going to be directed to come in on Tribute Way, and there will be a sign that will direct people who have haz waste products to go around to the back of the building, in which there'll be Clean Harbor people to help. All your forms will either be filled out or they'll help you fill them out, and then you pop your trunk and somebody will take them. There'll be no hands-on from the residents. Also, there's going to be a truck right out here in the front. Bring your papers and documents. You can stay, you can leave your boxes, you can watch it being shredded, and then move along. Under the pavilion, we'll have the women community, the Orange Women Community, collecting household wares, clothing for donations. There's also going to be the Buy Nothing group, which you could bring and get rid of any of your junk and collect any of somebody else's junk. Whatever you think is your treasure. Thank you.
Final call for comments?
Okay. Chris Brow, 160 Omen Avenue. Board of Ed member for 12 years, Amity Finance Committee. Obviously, I support the budget. We've worked very hard on it and worked on creating a nice budget. And I just wanted to call out, we started this meeting with Jim talking about doing more with less. And the gentleman just came up and said, looking for new ideas. And we do that as well. We look for savings on a continual basis as we go through the budget cycle, year to year, every year. But before you come tomorrow or Saturday to shred these, on page 73, I'd just like to call a little attention to one thing, just one little new idea, and that is around our bonding efforts. Often, municipalities like ours start a bonding cycle, and they say, well, every 5 years we bond for the roads, or every 3 years we bond for the roof, or what have you. And what we've started to do at Amity is look for things that we can put on a 5-year plan, so we know what it will cost, we have it in our view, coming forward, and then we take, if there is money, we can take that 1 or 2% at the end of the year and apply it to those things so that we don't have to bond. And currently, we have no bonds planned because we've been paying as we go with the money that we're given fortunately, by the taxpayers every year. So we are trying to do more with less. We don't want to incur the bonding fees that come along. Every time you bond, it's $70,000. We all know interests have gone up. So we're protecting the district, protecting the town by using money smarter, being more frugal with it. I'm cheap. I don't want to pave the road if we don't have to pave the road. If we have to pave the road, we have to pave the road. But I'd like to use our money as much as possible, and that's one of the things that we've, as a board, have driven that forward. And we're always looking for new ideas to do that. So we appreciate suggestions. So thank you for the time tonight, for listening, and also thank you for the support on the vote coming up on May 2nd.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, any other last thought? Okay, maybe one slide that may be helpful is just a reminder to have the dates up there. Just to keep them up there, and Mr. Chairman, are we good?
There's no other questions or comments. Thank you all for coming, and
Thank you.
Don't forget to vote on May 2nd and May 17th.